Chapter 9. Money and Banking. There are three main functions of money: medium of exchange, unit of account, and store of value. As a medium of exchange, money represents an item that sellers generally accept and buyers generally use to pay for goods and services. As a unit of account, money is a standard measurement unit in terms of which prices can be stated and the relative value of goods and services compared. As a store of value, money is an asset that can be set aside to purchase items in the future. Two definitions of the U.S. money supply are M1 and M2. M1 is the narrowest definition of the U.S. money supply. It consists of currency in the hands of the non-bank public and all checkable deposits. M2 is a broader definition of money and includes M1 plus several near monies, certain highly liquid financial assets that do not function directly or fully as a medium of exchange, but can be readily converted into currency or checkable deposits. The categories of near monies owned by individuals are saving deposits, time deposits, and money market mutual funds. Here are the components of the U.S. money supply as of January 2008. M1 amounted to $1,365 billion, of which currency was 56% and checkable deposits were 44%. M2 amounted to $7.5 trillion, with M1 contributing to 18% of this amount. Small-time deposits and money market mutual funds adding 16% and 14% respectively. The biggest share of M2 was savings deposits, 52%. Why does paper money have value? The U.S. money supply is guaranteed by government's ability to keep the value of money relatively stable. Money has value because of its acceptability, legal tender designation, and relative scarcity. Government has decreed currency as legal tender, thus paper money is a valid and legal means of payment of debt. The purchasing power of the dollar, that is, the amount of goods and services a unit of money will buy, varies inversely with the price level. If the price level rises, the purchasing power of the dollar falls, and vice versa. Inflation may also affect the purchasing power of money and its acceptability. When the government prints too much money, the purchasing power of money declines. Also, runaway inflation may significantly reduce the purchasing power of the dollar and may cause it to cease being used as a medium of exchange. A key element of the U.S. banking system is the Federal Reserve System, the Fed. The Fed consists of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve and 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve is a 7-member group that supervises and controls the money and banking system of the U.S. The 12 Federal Reserve banks are 12 banks chartered by the U.S. government to control the money supply and perform other functions. They collectively serve as the nation's central bank and also serve as bankers' bank. Most nations have a single central bank. The Federal Reserve System divides the United States into 12 districts, each having one central bank, and in some instances one or more branches of the central bank. Hawaii and Alaska are included in the 12th district. This diagram presents the framework of the Federal Reserve System and its relationship to the non-bank public. With the aid of the Federal Open Market Committee, the Board of Governors makes the basic policy decisions that provide monetary control of the U.S. money and banking system, consisting of commercial banks and thrift institutions, which in turn lend to the public. The 12 Federal Reserve banks implement these decisions. The Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, aids the Board of Governors in conducting monetary policy. It is the 12-member Federal Reserve Group that determines the purchase and sale policies of the Federal Reserve banks in the market for U.S. securities in order to conduct the monetary policy. The FOMC is made up of 12 individuals: the 7 members of the Board of Governors, the President of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, and 4 presidents of Federal Reserve banks on a 1-year rotating basis. Banking institutions in the U.S. are commercial banks and thrifts. Of the approximately 7,600 commercial banks, 3/4 are state banks. The remaining 1/4 are national banks, chartered by the federal government to operate nationally. The 11,400 thrift institutions are regulated by agencies separate and apart from the Board of Governors and the Federal Reserve banks. The Fed performs the following functions: issues currency, sets reserve requirements and holds reserves, lends money to banks and thrifts, provides the banking system with a means for collecting checks, acts as a fiscal agent for the federal government, supervises the operation of banks, controls the money supply and thus indirectly sets interest rates. The Fed is an independent agency of the government. This protects the Fed from political pressure so that it could effectively control the money supply and interest rates to foster price level stability. The U.S. has a fractional reserve banking system in which banks and thrifts are required to hold less than 100% of their checkable deposit liabilities as cash reserves. Only a portion of the total money supply is held in reserve as currency, which allows banks to create money through lending. All commercial banks and thrifts that provide checkable deposits must, by law, keep required reserves. Required reserves are an amount of funds equal to a specified percentage of the bank's own deposit liabilities. They must be kept on deposit with the Federal Reserve Bank or held as cash in the bank's vault. The amount of required reserves is determined by the reserve ratio, which we denote as R, the ratio of commercial banks' required reserves to this bank's checkable deposit liabilities. When a bank holds more in reserves than is required, it holds excess reserves. Excess reserves are actual bank or thrift reserves minus legally required reserves. An individual bank can only lend an amount equal to its excess reserves, but the commercial banking system can lend by a multiple of its excess reserves. The banking system magnifies any original excess reserves into a larger amount of newly created checkable deposit money. The monetary multiplier, denoted M, is the multiple of its excess reserves, by which the banking system can expand checkable deposits, and thus the money supply, by making new loans. M is equal to 1 over R. The maximum checkable deposit creation, D, is equal to total excess reserves, E, times the monetary multiplier, M.